Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. It is now, it's 9:40 Pacific for whatever time zone that you are in. I would like to thank this amazing panel for being here today and taking the time to present for us about the Ohio College Teaching Consortium's case study. And I'd like to turn it over to them to begin the presentation. Thank you again.
Thanks so much, Andrea. Hello, everyone. We're so happy that you're with us, and we're happy you're joining us if you're watching this in another time zone. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule to learn a little bit about the Ohio College Teaching Consortium. My name is Melinda Rhodes DeSalvo. I'm the Associate Director for Strategic Partnerships at the Michael V. Drake Institute for Teaching and Learning at Ohio State University, and I'd like to introduce you to our panelists today. Joining me are Kay Halasek, Director of the Institute for Teaching and Learning at Ohio State University, Terry Filico, who is the Chair of the Ohio Faculty Senate of Technical and Community Colleges, and Lori Zakel, Faculty Engagement Lead Coach of the Ohio Association of Community Colleges. I'm going to turn it over to Kay and ask her to present to you about the origins of the Ohio College Teaching Consortium and some of the frameworks and models that really did inform our collaboration.
Oh, thanks, Melinda. Welcome, everyone. And again, thank you for joining us. As Melinda noted, I'm Kay Halasek, and I direct the Institute at Ohio State University, where I'm also a professor of English. And the university from which I speak with you today, like universities across the state of Ohio here in the United States, is located on lands ceded in the 1795 Treaty of Greenville and the forced removal of tribal nations through the Indian Removal Act of 1830. We all honor the resiliency of these tribal nations and recognize the historical contexts that have affected and continue to affect the indigenous peoples of these lands. And thank you for joining me with that land acknowledgement. This first slide that you're seeing now is a slide from the website of the Michael V. Drake Institute for Teaching and Learning. We start here in our conversation about the Ohio College Teaching Consortium, which we'll use, for which we'll use the abbreviation OCTC. Because the Drake Institute and its endorsement program, which we began in 2016, is sort of the model and the impetus for the inclusive teaching endorsements through the OCTC that we'll be talking with you about today. The endorsements through the Drake Institute are credentials that are awarded to members of our university community, from undergraduate students, graduate and professional students, staff, and faculty at the university who participate in sustained continuing professional development to enrich their teaching and to positively impact student learning. And these endorsements, one of the first ones that we had in the Drake Institute was the inclusive teaching endorsement. And it served as the model, as I already mentioned, both in content and structure. It served as the model for the OCTC endorsement. I do want to note that at the Drake Institute, I think we have something now nearing 24 different teaching endorsements, everything from meaningful inquiry and teaching information literacy to online learning and ethics and teaching. I'm going to step back also for a couple of more minutes to give you a bit of the historical narrative that Melinda mentioned. It was in March 2019, as you'll see on this slide, which is a capture of the strong start to finish convening that we had in March of 2019, is a statewide meeting of higher education professionals. And I was asked during a Q&A session during which I was speaking about the endorsements by Mike Snyder, who was then president of the Ohio Association of Community Colleges, the OACC, whether the institute endorsements, which were available only to instructors at Ohio State, whether those could be extended to instructors at other colleges and universities across the state of Ohio. My immediate and very public response in front of hundreds of my colleagues and administrators at Ohio State University and from the Ohio Department of Higher Education was simply, yes. A former community college teacher myself, and I have not regretted that. I have not regretted that yes. In fact, I think that emphatic yes in March of 2019 really sparked interest and the attention of the Ohio Department of Higher Education and OACC. A former community college teacher myself, I knew the challenge of time, cost, and location that faced many of my colleagues, compromising their abilities to access professional development programming. When you're teaching at 2 or 3 different colleges and driving between them, among them, you simply don't have the time or capacity to take on the additional work, often uncompensated and often unrecognized, that is required of continued professional learning. And I also embrace and take as an ethical responsibility the mission of my university to serve the citizens of the state of Ohio. That mission, in my mind, makes it incumbent upon me and the institute that I lead to extend our reach outward beyond the walls and the grounds of The Ohio State University, to partner with other colleges and universities and governmental agencies to bring professional development programming to everyone who seeks it. Our thinking in the Institute and in the OCTC about our mission and the vision for the consortium is perhaps best framed, and I would say most recently, by Stephen Mintz, who calls for centers for teaching and learning to broaden their scope and responsibilities to radically alter our center's mission, approach, and areas of responsibility to break out of our silos and drive transformation. Specifically, Mintz calls for training all instructors in trauma-informed and inclusive pedagogies. And you have the live link there, if we can download our presentation to that piece from Mintz. I believe it was just in maybe March of 2020, just earlier this year. So in March 2019, when I so publicly committed myself in the Institute to extending and scaling endorsements to instructors across the state of Ohio, I had in mind other collaborative models, and some of those are listed here on this slide. The Ohio Campus Compact, and another, which is not listed here, Ohio Link, which is a statewide network of university libraries in Ohio that make available the holdings of any one institution's libraries to faculty, graduate students, and undergraduate students at other institutions. And I also turned to my years of successful experience working with colleagues, institutions, and government agencies to build networks like the Ohio Wins network. We're very lucky in the state of Ohio. I will say we have strong support over time from the Ohio Department of Higher Education for these kinds of initiatives. But those models, the ones that I've mentioned here briefly, served as our framework in late 2019 and early 2020 as we consulted with ODHE, the Department of Higher Education, OACC, and other organizations, and began our planning in earnest. Then the new normal. It's certainly not an overstatement. Well, I think it would be an overstatement to say that COVID made the OCTC possible, but the pandemic really did create an exigence that propelled us forward with much greater velocity than we would have realized had we just been working under the typical tempo, if you will, of higher education institutions and governmental agencies. March 2020 really brought with it that quick pivot that we all experienced to online delivery of meetings and programs, and that necessary rapid response to remote teaching and distance learning. And with that exigence, we found came an opportunity, a forced opportunity certainly, but one that truly drove forward the planning for and the launch in autumn of 2020, the OCTC and its inclusive teaching endorsement. We continue to embrace Mintz's vision that our collective continuing responsibility in the Institute and the OCT is not merely a one-off response to an unexpected emergency, but a mandate for change to a more proactive role, a transformative role to serve the greater good through engaged professional learning in the state of Ohio. I trust the remainder of this presentation will demonstrate the power of the collective to achieve our goals and exceed the expectations that we set for ourselves. I'll turn it over now to Lori, who's Professor Emeritus from Sinclair Community College and the Faculty Engagement Lead Coach with OACC.
Thanks, Kay. I remember very vividly when Mike Snyder said to me at the time, again, he was the chief academic officer at the Ohio Association of Community Colleges, and he said, Lori, you will never believe this. Ohio State is going to help initiate a statewide professional development endorsement proposal. And we were all so excited about it because, as Kay indicated, there are some, and of course I represent community colleges, and there are some community colleges that are relatively small in Ohio, and they don't have the bandwidth to be able to provide a high level of professional development that this consortium has been able to do. And it is amazing to me that it got started as quickly as it did. And again, as Kay indicated, that was one thing that pandemic helped us with. Originally, we called ourselves the Ohio Professional Development Consortium, which worked for us internally, and it worked for some internal promotion. But we realized that we did need something that was a little more explanatory when we reached out and created a website and developed those sorts of things. So we became, very recently actually, the Ohio College Teaching Consortium. And the impetus, we knew there were increased demands on post-secondary instructors to pivot. And not just because of the pandemic, but hybrid and remote learning is becoming more and more popular and would have been without the pandemic. But the pandemic, of course, helped move that along a lot more quickly. But there are budgetary challenges that impact that breadth and depth of professional development offerings. So again, as I said, there are some community colleges that just didn't have the bandwidth to be able to offer that high level of PD. And of course, enrollment trends required those instructors to be equipped with those strategies that increase learning. We in Ohio are very focused on increasing student learning. We've pivoted from the importance of access for students, and again, especially in the community college, the importance of access is still there, but access without success doesn't help anyone. So we've changed our focus and shifted our focus to student learning and student outcomes and helping students learn. So what can we do to enhance the learning experience for students and for the diverse students that we serve in Ohio? The Ohio College Teaching Consortium also wanted to be sure to collaborate across institutions and promote evidence-based teaching strategies. And on the next slide, you'll see the colleges that we serve in Ohio. Ohio has 14 public universities, for baccalaureate degrees and post-baccalaureate degrees. Those 14 public universities have a total of 24 regional campuses, and each regional campus is affiliated with one of the public universities. And then there are 23 standalone public community colleges in Ohio. And that group of colleges, all of those are essentially who we are promoting and offering that professional development to. We had early partners, as the next slide indicates, and the early partners in that process, as Kay talked about originally, the Ohio Higher Education, the Ohio Department of Higher Ed is the governmental entity that oversees higher ed here in Ohio. The Ohio State University, of course, is the land-grant institution that is the sort of the touchstone for Ohio colleges and universities. Ohio University is, I think, the oldest university in Ohio, and it is also a significant player in the state, as is the University of Cincinnati and Miami University. Those might be names that people outside of the United States have heard. Certainly within the United States, those are some big named institutions here in Ohio. And then, as Kay indicated as well, the Ohio Association of Community Colleges, which is the collective of the 23 public community colleges in Ohio who work together to do some politicking as well as to support the initiatives of those community colleges. So those were the early partners in the process. The next slide is going to be covered by Terry, and I'm going to turn that over to you, Terry.
Thank you, Lori. Just a little bit more about myself. I'm a full-time faculty member teaching political science and college success at my institution, which is in Springfield, Ohio. But as chair of the Ohio Faculty Senate, I get to interact with faculty members from across the state who teach at community and technical colleges. And I bring that up because when we talk about who the faculty are, that includes people like me who teach general education courses, but also welding instructors, commercial driver's license instructors, nursing and physical therapy instructors. It includes full-time faculty and many part-time adjunct faculty, all of whom were invited to participate in this opportunity. And so when we talk about the outcomes for an individual faculty member, sure, they're going to get to go through and be able to define inclusive teaching, which is great. And then they can bring that back to their campus. Then they can discuss research on how effective inclusive teaching strategies can impact learning. And we can do that in our individual classes, but then we can bring that back to our programs. Practice identifying opportunities and proactive measures for inclusive learning environments, but those are inclusive learning environments in labs and in general education courses and in very applied settings and in flipped classrooms and in online classrooms and in hybrid classrooms. So again, just sort of there's such a diverse set of faculties and subject matters that the opportunities are, I mean, limitless is probably, I don't know if it's an overstatement, but we'll see. Identifying challenges and supports to inclusion within their current courses. This is something that is a hot topic everywhere. It's not just through this program's endorsement, and it's something that faculty we've been looking for the opportunity to figure out how to talk about it. And again, as both Kay and Lori mentioned, some of our institutions are quite small. Some of us are quite isolated, whether it's in, we're the only person who teaches our subject matter on our campus. And so an opportunity to engage with other faculty, both at the community colleges and at the universities, full-time and part-time, and to have those conversations it's really welcome. It's something that a lot of us just don't have. And then to plan specific inclusive strategies towards our own teaching practices, again, that's in our classrooms, but the people that I've spoken to, certainly we're looking for bringing this back to our campuses and spreading the word. So those are the outcomes. So how do you go about doing this? You complete an interest form. I'll be honest, I've done that. And then I got distracted. There are 6 to 9 hours. You're supposed to engage in 6 to 9 hours of professional learning. Those could be synchronous or asynchronous. So I have an opportunity as somebody who did not follow up to go back and follow up. After each session, the participants are asked to submit a reflection. And the reflections, we'll get to this later, but the reflections are where you see how people process the information. We got a lot of positive feedback, not just in the content, but also in a survey that was given later. So they took a lot away from the variety of sessions that were offered and looked forward to next steps for professional development. And that point there in the middle of the slide is probably one of the more crucial ones. We often go through professional development exercises, or at least I know a lot of people who do, and you don't think about how to apply or don't think about how to move forward. But we explicitly asked in the reflection for, where do you take this next? The reflections were submitted, they were reviewed, and endorsements were awarded in May and in August. And as we continue on, you'll see that we had a projection for what this might look like, and it was a little bit better than that. So, and I'll turn it over. Who's next? I'm forgetting who's next. All right, back to Melinda. Thanks.
Thanks so much. One of our very early partners was Stephanie Davidson, who is now a retired vice chancellor for academic affairs with the Ohio Department of Higher Education. And I just like to take the opportunity to have you hear from her. This was an introductory video to the Ohio College Teaching Consortium, and she really sums up quite nicely both the mission of our initial collaboration and the value and benefits.
Department of Higher Education. At the Department of Higher Ed, I've had the opportunity to work on several initiatives that involve faculty, including things like the Ohio Mathematics Initiative, Ohio's Strong Start to Finish, where campuses are coming together to ensure that more students complete their gateway math and English courses in their first year, and Ohio's Finish for Your Future initiative, which is making recommendations on how Ohio can better support adult learners. In each of these initiatives, Closing equity gaps has been identified as a priority. And in each of these initiatives, faculty have said, we want to help, but we need practical ideas about how we can change what we're doing in the classroom to support the students who we know historically have been least likely to succeed, whether it's students of color, economically disadvantaged students, first-generation students, or adult students. The professional development that the consortium is making available is exactly what the faculty have been asking for, and I'm really excited for this pilot year. In Ohio, we're very lucky to have a wealth of public colleges and universities, each with different student bodies and each with their own unique missions. Some of our institutions have very robust teaching and learning centers that provide faculty professional development on a wide range of topics. Others have smaller teaching and learning centers with more limited programs for their faculty. But by pooling resources across the state, this consortium will be able to make an array of professional development opportunities available to faculty.
Hello, I'm Tom.
So as Terry pointed out, we had an early goal when we came together. And our early goal, we really wanted to be quite realistic, but also a little bit aspirational. We knew that we would have participation. We knew that we could communicate out about the inclusive teaching endorsement, but we also didn't necessarily have a robust structure for the OCTC. At that point, we had no website. We were using the Drake Institute for Teaching and Learning website as a way of communicating. But what we did have were partners with networks, specifically OACC and the Ohio Department of Higher Education. So we thought, well, we'll probably reach quite a few people. We'll have a lot of involvement, but we don't know exactly how many endorsement awardees we might actually end up with after a year. This is going to be our pilot year. So we decided 75 participants. That'd be great. Let's set that as our goal. When we look at the actual results from our first pilot year, we had well over 500 participants, 706 interest forms submitted. Of those participants and interest forms, 36 institutions across the state of Ohio are represented. We've hosted 24 events. They've been put on by our institute, by the University of Cincinnati, by Tri-C Community College, Lorain County Community College, Columbus State Community College, Ohio University, Miami University, and more. We've had 831 reflections submitted as a result of those 24 events, and we actually had 102 endorsement participants complete the endorsement and awarded the endorsement. So it really did far exceed what we initially intended. And I think, please chime in, other panelists, I think that there were a number of reasons for this, but people were quite hungry for the types of programming that were offered. This also, in the time of COVID, challenged a lot of our assumptions about professional learning and professional development and how it can be delivered and who attends. And I think in general, it's been for the best. If you want to see just kind of some of where our awardees teach, you can check those institutions and then the numbers of awardees next to that. University of Cincinnati was quite a large player in our endorsement. So when we came to the end of our pilot year, we did administer a post-endorsement survey. We administered the survey to all completers and those who also attended at least one event. This is our survey result, and remember, we did have 102 completers. Of the end, that's 63. 52 of those were completers. So about a 50% return on our completion. This tells you a little bit about our endorsement awardees. If you look at the percentages here, they certainly do reflect the state of Ohio generally. So, for example, when you look at our participants, we had 4.76% of our participants, participant respondents were Asian, 2.2 in the state of Ohio, 9.52 Black or African American, 12.41 in the state of Ohio, and obviously most of our participants identified as white, and that's 79.37%, 81% in the state of Ohio. So it is reflecting our population. This is our respondents that represented community colleges and public universities. And what we're most pleased with here is that we have a nice equitable distribution amongst community colleges and public universities. And we feel that that really did reflect well in terms of the engagements that they were able to have with one another and the collaborations that they were able to have with one another. We did survey about our outcomes for the endorsement, our stated outcomes. We were very pleased with the survey results. 5 was highly agreeing with the perception of achievement of outcomes. And if you'll look, the definition of inclusive teaching, certainly we wanted people to define it, and they did. They also felt very confident in their ability to identify inclusive teaching strategies to implement. Now, if we had any variation, it really was in their perceived ability to discuss research on how effective inclusive teaching strategies impacted learning, assessment of those teaching strategies, and also the belief that the endorsement would be valued by a particular institution. Now, those weren't surprising, but it is something to take note of. We also asked our participants and our awardees to reflect on the sessions and the quality of the sessions. If you'll notice, we were very pleased with the amount of engagement and collaboration. That's the last item among the participants attending, because we were delivering most of these synchronously via Zoom. And so it was a little bit of a challenge for those presenters. We also were very, we took note and were very appreciative of the fact that participants indicated they would share what they learned back at home at their institutions. And so that is the 5th item. Panelists, is there anything else that you would want to mention regarding this part of our post-endorsement survey?
This is Kay. I think I might just mention one thing relevant to what you just noted, Melinda, and that is in the reflections themselves, which were really, really rich sort of statements and narratives about the various kinds of engagements, was that people were already, even in their reflections in the midst of their participation in the endorsement, relating how they were already taking what they learned back to their campuses, how they were forwarding the information, and not just communicating about the endorsement or the program, but more specifically about what they were learning in their classrooms. And I think in one instance too, Melinda, actually beginning like small learning communities on their campuses built around, so these were some of the most generative responses that we received. It was very rewarding to know that folks not only felt empowered in their understanding of inclusive teaching, but felt empowered to step back into their campuses to begin to facilitate or contribute to their learning communities.
If I can add something, not necessarily about the survey, but the survey indicates how prepared faculty were to then take next steps, and the opportunity that some of them have this fall to do the workshops on diversity, equity, and inclusion, where they explicitly are bringing things back to campus. I mean, it's nice to see that their survey results actually foreshadow what's happening now.
Right.
We move to the next step.
And I know in OACC meetings, we regularly hear from chief academic officers who indicate that their faculty have been signed up for this thing. It's through Ohio State, and so that is getting out. That professional development opportunity is getting out. So that's really exciting, especially, like I said, as has been stated, this is our pilot year. We are just finishing up our pilot year of this. So,
right. I also would like to highlight that the idea of professional learning or professional development being recognized by an institution, I think that's really an interesting perception that we surveyed. But we do have provosts and deans requesting the names of endorsement awardees so that they might recognize them on campus. So that's something else that we've realized. Sorry, go ahead, Terry.
By way of example, at my institution, at our fall convocation or our fall meeting with our provost, she highlighted the two of the faculty members who had completed this. It was just in the middle of a slide deck. It was just, here were the promotions, here are the new faculty, here are the faculty who completed this teaching endorsement, kept going, but it was there. It was considered an achievement to be recognized along with the other things that were listed. So that was nice to see.
Right.
And I don't know, Melinda, we haven't actually said this explicitly. There's no cost to the faculty members or the institutions for participating in this professional development. This is all, luckily, with the support that we have, we're able to make these available to faculty at no cost.
And I think that we're very appreciative to teaching and learning centers and educational developers across the state for making that possible and opening up their sessions.
And that reinforces that it's an opportunity for adjunct faculty in a way that might not have been elsewise. Just because they rarely are given funds for professional development. Right.
As you can see, we did actually ask about our reflections and the value of the reflections. We were pleased that most people disagreed with the fact that the reflections were just busy work. So I think we were happy with that, but we will make some adjustments based on feedback. We also did some qualitative coding of some of the open-ended questions on our survey. And these were the program highlights as identified by participants and awardees. The implementation support for the evidence-based instructional strategies that was noted again and again. They liked the idea that these strategies were practical and actionable. They could take them from that session and implement them in the classroom. They also noted the lived experiences of presenters and students and cases that came up during the professional development sessions. Flexible access was absolutely critical, and you can see that in some of the quotes from the participants that I've placed on this slide. We invited them to attend synchronously via Zoom, but also to view the recordings, the asynchronous recordings of our sessions. And we actually said, if you would do that in watch parties, we call them watch parties, bring colleagues together, watch this particular session, talk about it, take the breaks, have conversation, and collaborate after that. And then again, as Kate pointed out, these were of no cost to any of our faculty. So again, I think you can see very clearly what people appreciated, and that implementation piece is critical. This is Edmund Chang. He's one of our participants, and I'd like for you to hear his perspective on some of the values of the endorsement.
Hello, everyone. My name is Edmund Chang. I'm an assistant professor of English at Ohio University, and I'm one of 5, I think, maybe 6 people who completed the Ohio College Teaching Consortium's Inclusive Teaching Endorsement at Ohio. And I was asked to share a little bit about my experience with the program, and I figure I would record a little video. Hopefully you can see myself and the slide. It's not too weird. I guess I'm going to sort of start personally. One of the things that I always try to think about is, what does diversity mean? What does equity mean? What does inclusion mean? And I think One of the best things about the teaching endorsement is that it allows folks to come together, to network, and maybe, in the future, especially, as the pandemic kind of calms down, hopefully, fingers crossed, we will be able to, do some of this in person. But I'm always really interested in looking at ways to improve my own pedagogy. And obviously, this was an opportunity for professional development, which is something that my institution, I guess, values. And so being able to see other perspectives and other people's expertise, I think, is always really helpful. I particularly enjoyed the programs where members of historically marginalized and or underrepresented communities led the workshops and talks. I think that's really helpful and really useful as well. And this is also a way for me to obviously continue to revise and refine my own teaching philosophy, my own pedagogy courses, and all of those things. The other reason I did the program was because I am in a department where the sort of diversity is, pretty much lacking at all levels. So at the faculty level, I'm one of now 2 visible faculty of color. Our grad students and our undergrads are also pretty much homogenous, and that's not surprising given my institution and its location. So I really pushed to establish a diversity and equity committee in the department, which finally got constituted this year. And I felt like doing the endorsement would kind of give me the cred to be able to do that, above and beyond, the fact that I am obviously a person of color and an out person on campus. And this way, the committee and myself could push for further diversity and inclusion and equity in the department at the level of hiring new faculty, curriculum design, and obviously trying to diversify the student body. And I think then that, of course, extends to the institutional level. I know Ohio is really trying to sort of push for diversity and inclusion as one of its sort of core goals and values. And I think that that's much harder to do. It's easy to say, but harder to do, put into sort of practice. And I feel like the endorsement is just one step. It's a way to sort of signal that this is important. And so I hope more faculty continue to participate. And even after you've gotten the endorsement, I hope to also continue to participate. I think the programming is sort of really valuable. And hopefully one day, I will also be able to share my own sort of interests and expertise with the consortium. So those are basically, that's the overview that I have to offer. I think it was overall, really thoughtful and helpful. I particularly liked the perspectives from smaller institutions, from community colleges, from institutions that probably have very different kinds of students and classes and things like that. So I think that's a big strength. I also really enjoyed that a lot of the programs were made asynchronous so that you could sort of attend to them when you could. And I really hope, like I said, to continue to contribute. Maybe, if you do them, to keep doing the endorsement in successive years, you can get a little like, silver or gold level kind of endorsement. That would be great. So I hope this has been useful and thoughtful, and feel free to contact me if you'd like. My information is on the slide. So thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of the day.
So again, one of the things that Edmund mentioned that was very, very valuable was the idea that you could, it's kind of just in time or on demand, if you will, with our professional learning. And I think that's a shift. for many of us at traditional or even innovative centers for teaching and learning, this idea that we could potentially offer faculty professional development on demand. So one of the questions that we asked in our post-endorsement survey did have to do with how you prefer to receive this type of development or learning. And if you'll notice, people love synchronously via Zoom. I think part of that has to do with COVID, and that we really did get comfortable with this idea of attending conferences like this synchronously. People had no preference, or they kind of like the idea of viewing the recording. Now, if you'll notice, we had no one that said, I prefer to be face-to-face. And that's really kind of interesting, because once we were able to return, a lot of us were like, I can't believe that we had to spend all this time away from one another. But I think it does speak to the value of recordings and, again, on demand. We also asked about program improvements, because we knew that there would be program improvements that were necessary. This was a first attempt. And we were really interested in what our participants had to say about program improvements. They did want the reflections revamped. We asked basically takeaways, implementation plans, and then next steps. And so many of our participants said, I was repeating myself in that third reflection question. You really need to adapt it. They also did suggest, why don't you have us turn in activities or assessments that we design? Can we turn in artifacts? And that was really interesting. So we'll go back and look at that again. And of course, we find the artifacts quite interesting from a research standpoint. They wanted increased communication from us, and that made sense. In the midst of our programming, we developed a website for the Ohio College Teaching Consortium. Our recordings are housed there, and you'll see uploaded to our presentation site a document that contains links to some of our recordings so that you can see what those sessions are like. You'll also see a flyer that we distributed very early on. They asked for a creation of specialized sessions. So I think they were looking for deeper dives and evidence-based instructional strategies. Sometimes they were looking for STEM-based sessions or professional learning. We also had people on the opposite sides who were in the arts and humanities who were looking for very specialized sessions in that way. And then they were seeking increased collaboration. So if there weren't a lot of breakout rooms, they wanted more breakout rooms. The increased collaboration, I think, also means outside of sessions, right? And not, in fact, I don't think, they specifically said it means outside of sessions as well. How can we bring faculty together so that they can collaborate across institutions, sometimes across disciplines, with one another, and continue those network or extend those networks? Again, you'll see some of the quotes from our survey that highlight some of these program improvements or recommendations. So our next steps. Part of this is logistical, part of it is administrative, part of it is strategic. We did formalize roles for an executive and a planning committee, because we found that you couldn't do all the program planning and then make other decisions and seek grant funds. I should pause, step back for just a second, and say that the Ohio Department of Higher Education had some grant funding that was left over, that was made available to the OCTC so that we could support some administrative functions, a program coordinator, very limited time for that individual, but it was extremely helpful. We do know we need to seek out and secure sustainable funding if this programming is to continue. And we want to explore and establish practices to maintain collaboration amongst all of the partners that are involved in the Ohio College Teaching Consortium. We'll increase communication structures. We have a newsletter that goes out regularly, and again, the website that has been developed, but both of those things need refinement. We're looking again at program requirements, and then streamlining and refining program administration. Mainly in that area, we can offload some of the registration functions, et cetera, to a platform that is more of a course management, learning management system where people can actually enroll and do that on their own. The future of the consortium, we have actually been asked to deliver some specialized training already. Ohio has what they call Ohio Transfer 36 learning outcomes, and that's so that students can move from community colleges to colleges and universities, or vice versa, to transfer, and then have certain GE requirements met, and one of those is DEI course requirements. And so we delivered a mini course design institute to 60 instructors and faculty developers across the state of Ohio just this past month. We really are thinking about research questions. I mean, we have 800 and something reflections that are really deep and I think rich and just waiting for some analysis to happen. We've had the recommendation from other centers for teaching and learning about, can we do regional events when we are face-to-face? Can we bring people together outside of our Zoom space? And then we've also looked at the possibility of additional endorsements. Panel, is there anything that I've missed or that you would like to highlight before we open it up for Q&A? So at this point, I do believe we have some individuals with us. I wish that everybody watching this later would be able to join in the conversation. But if you have any questions, feel free to pose them now. Kay, Lori, Terry, or I would be happy to answer those. And I'm sure that we can come up with other topics to discuss or to tell you a little bit more about the College Teaching Consortium if we don't see any in the chat.
Well, thank you very much to the presenters. First of all, I'd like to give you a round of applause on your very interesting project. I'm going to invite all of the members of the room to unmute if they would like to participate. So the invitation has been sent, and I will facilitate any questions that are in the chat if you have any. Well, barring any questions popping up, I actually have a couple, and I would be really interested to know if you think that part of the success of the project so far has to do with the context of the college and university system in Ohio. The fact that you have this network already, does that then engender people towards the collaboration that was definitely part of the cross-state interaction? I think about how I'm in Canada. Each province runs education differently. We don't necessarily have that same sort of network across, and how much of it was, do you think, successful based on the network that is already established?
I'll touch on that just a little bit. It's interesting because in Ohio, we have something called performance-based funding, which in essence pits colleges against each other for state funding. So it's a bit of a weird system in that we have to kind of overlook that to try to work together to do some improvement, because, and unfortunately, the amount of money is capped total. So we are each competing for the same bundle of money. It's not as though a rising tide lifts all boats, or whatever that phrase is. This really is more of a competitive structure. So it's a little bit odd that we are able, I think, to work so well together, because we really don't have the kind of infrastructure that, say, I don't know, I think maybe Florida has something that's a little bit more unified, or the community colleges in Indiana, for example, are all kind of one community college. But we really are not like that. So it's almost surprising that it has gone as well as it has, with these kind of disparate, even though we're public institutions, we really are our own little sort of fiefdoms. But the fact that so many people have expressed interest and have participated is really a testament to how important this kind of professional development is, and how willing our institutions are to work together on that.
And just to piggyback on that, Lori's talking about the community colleges, which have a line in the state budget, which is different than the line that the universities have in the state budget, right? So like, it's not just that it feels like we have this implicit competition across the community colleges. We're also not always thought of in the same higher education universe as our colleagues down the road at the universities. So an opportunity like this to work to get, well, first of all, as from a community college faculty perspective, the opportunity to do something like this, I mean, I think people just jumped at it, but to see the leadership that came from the statewide organizations and from Ohio State and from the Drake Institute. If the Drake Institute wasn't there, this wouldn't have happened, right? I mean, just so to have a model already in place, and when you're in Ohio, the Ohio State University is the big, you know, we look to leadership, and when we get leadership from Ohio State, you know, I mean, that's kind of crucial in something like this. I don't know that it could have happened without that.
Andrea, I really appreciate that question. I think I'll just maybe add one more reflection, and that is, I don't think it requires a state situated consortium, that is through a state Department of Higher Education. I think there are all sorts of other kinds of consortia around which this kind of engagement might flourish. I'm thinking, for example, of the small liberal arts colleges in Ohio. There are numerous small liberal arts colleges in Ohio, some of whom participated, right, from faculty from those small liberal arts colleges participated, but they have their own consortium in the state of Ohio through which they realize dramatic impact on the work of the small liberal arts colleges. And so I could imagine like the state system that I think Lori mentioned just now in Indiana or Florida. I would think of the state system in Texas, but I also then imagine these other small liberal arts colleges as another kind of consortium. And that's what the Ohio Campus Compact, that's a consortium built around a particular set of questions and objectives around citizenship. And so sometimes I think they're sort of institutionally driven, state driven, or other kinds of consortia and thematic areas to sort of drive the interest and the impact.
It's really interesting. I just think that, you know, when we try and put together cross-institutional initiatives, so much of it is then based on the individuals reaching out to their own networks and building those connections and starting to work. And I mean, we in Canada have a couple of organizations like the equivalent of ISSOTL for our Canadian version, which is ISSOTL Canada, and we have the Society for Teaching and Learning in Higher Ed. And those then become our de facto organizations, for lack of a better description, because we just don't have that same sort of connection across some of these institutional structures, either community college or, in our case, we use university instead of college, but the terminology is the same across those kinds of institutions. So when we try to put forward, say, you know, pan-Canadian activities around things like the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning, or initiatives like yours, where you're looking for essentially a bit of certification or raising professional development, they then become so much about the individual. So I think that the comment about the Drake Institute and its impact cannot be understated, because those are the places and spaces that give us that outside of our institution time as well as mental space to engage in these kinds of conversations that may not otherwise happen unless we're at a conference. Mm-hmm. Are there any other? Sorry, my mistake. I'll stop.
No, and just one of the, to kind of echo what Kay is saying, one of the interesting, I think, characteristics of this consortium is that people or centers have sustained their involvement over time. I think so often we launch these and then it falls to whom to kind of carry on and sustain the activity. And what we have found is an amazing generosity on the part of our partner institutions and fellow educational developers. And I think that we all enjoy working with one another, and then come to realize too that we don't have to have all of the expertise housed at our center. That the expertise belongs to partners as well, and it makes us all kind of better at what we're doing. So I think what will be interesting to me in the long term is how this sustains and what characteristics sustain the consortium. So if we look 3 or 4 or 5 years down the line, where will we be there, and how did that happen? So that's where I'm interested in looking.
Yeah, the networks that are going to be able to sustain that, right? And especially as people move on to other projects, or hopefully the speaker that you had who shared his own experience is somebody who then, you know, will pick up that as his own passion project. It's hard with the tension between wanting to be involved in those kinds of activities and also being a pre-tenure faculty member, right? He's having to meet expectations of their own institution as well.
That's exactly true. And one of our participants and our endorsement awardees, I think I had mentioned that the University of Cincinnati, they have a regional campus, Blue Ash, that was quite active in the inclusive teaching endorsement program. They actually have launched their own professional development program locally at Blue Ash. So this is, and we will contact them and say, and would you like to present back? And so I think that that's kind of the benefit in the long run.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Any other questions from the room? We've got about 3 or 4 minutes, so hopefully for another question.
If I can chime in, just not a question, but just to sort of follow up a little bit, and I put this in the chat, one of the opportunities this presents for a faculty member at like a community college where we don't have the same resources that the universities might have for travel and professional development, it's nice to see that there are faculty who may have an opportunity in the future to use this as a place to share their research and as a place to build their teaching, because that's what we focus on for the most part, to build their teaching and build research about their teaching and present about it. It's an opportunity we don't get without something like this. So it's been a wonderful opportunity for my faculty colleagues.
Yeah, I'm glad, Terry, I'm really glad you mentioned that, because I'm thinking of Edmund, but I'm also thinking about your colleagues and about that ISSOTL research that they may be undertaking. If they work through the endorsement, they learn, they do an implementation, they assess, and then they come back and present. And then that's a feature of the work that they're doing that can be recognized in addition to their teaching. So they're doing the continued professional learning, amplifying and improving their teaching, but also demonstrating through the research that they're undertaking, that other facet of the work that is made available to them. So I think you're exactly right. And we do have faculty who are presenting, or staff from universities who are presenting on their research. And I think that is a critical point to be made about one of the ways the consortium can grow and support faculty in a variety of ways.
Did we mention that grad students also might have participated? And so this was also an opportunity for people who are very early on in their careers to demonstrate their commitment to teaching as well, which is nice as well.
If I had a final observation too, I would note that with some of the specialized sessions, for example, the Mini Course Design Institute that we just completed, and some of the implementation calls that go through these sessions, we have the opportunity to collect quite a few artifacts that we can share back with faculty in terms of assignments, assessments, syllabi, those kinds of items. So I think that that's also one of the next steps now that we have the website that we can use to house these resources. Another opportunity to share back with faculty.
Thank you so much for your presentation today and for sharing all of this, and thank you for letting me engage with you in some conversation around how this works and the hope that it could be applicable in other places, because I think you've created this amazing network that hopefully is able to sustain itself. So again, thank you very much to our presenters. I will close the session, Andrea. And we have about a 10-minute break before the next one. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.